Calais backyard mortar. On July 4th, 2015, on South Street in Calais, Maine, a border town sitting right on the Canadian line, it was around 10 at night, and a backyard gathering was still going. Devin Staples was 22. He'd worked as a performer at Walt Disney World in Florida before coming home to Maine, and the people around him knew him as the entertainer of the group, the one who did bits. That night, he was in the yard with his brother Cody and a group of friends, and they'd been drinking. At some point, Devin picked up a reloadable mortar tube, the kind sold over the counter in fireworks stores across the state. He announced what he was going to do with it. Then he set it on top of his head. His friends crowded around him and tried to talk him out of it, and for a moment they thought they'd gotten through. He was holding a lighter. The mortar fired. The blast struck him in the head at contact range, and he died instantly in front of his brother. Emergency crews reached the South Street yard that night. In the days after, State Fire Marshal Joe Thomas said the investigation showed the death was accidental. State Police spokesman Stephen Coslin described the device as a reloadable mortar tube, available in consumer fireworks stores around the state, and he said that when Devin suggested he was going to do this, his friends had gathered around him, and they thought they had convinced him not to do it. How the shell had been sitting inside the tube became the question that stayed open. NBC News reported that the investigation revealed the firework had been loaded backward, so that it fired down into his skull instead of up into the sky. The Bangor Daily News reported that whether the firework was loaded correctly or upside down was the only question the investigation had left. His father, Russ Staples, said Devin had believed the firework was a dud. His fiancée said he hadn't lit the mortar on purpose. The death was ruled an accident. It was the first fireworks fatality in Maine since the state legalized consumer fireworks in 2012, repealing a ban that had stood since 1949. His family went public within days, arguing that legalization had put shells like the one that killed him into the hands of people at backyard parties. Roombeek Fireworks Depot. On May 13, 2000, in the Roombeek district of Enschede in the eastern Netherlands, it was a Saturday afternoon in a dense working-class neighborhood of terraced houses, and at around 3, a fire crew was working a building fire on a depot site sitting inside the residential blocks. The depot belonged to SE Fireworks, a licensed Dutch supplier run by Rudy Bakker and Willy Pater that stocked display fireworks for pop concerts and national festivities. The company had passed every safety audit it had ever been given. 4 firefighters were on the site, working the fire. It had started inside the central building, where roughly 900 kilograms of fireworks were stored. The fire doors inside the complex stood open. The fire spread from the central building into 2 shipping containers sitting at ground level, packed with more fireworks, with no earthworks between them and anything else. The first container went up with the force of about 0.8 of a ton of TNT. Then the chain reached the main stock. The final detonation involved roughly 177 tons of fireworks and carried the force of 4 to 5 tons of TNT. It killed all 4 firefighters working the site. 23 people died in total. 950 were injured. The blast was felt 50 kilometers away in Deventer. Fire crews were called in from across the German border to help fight what was left of it, and the blaze was under control by the end of the day, by which point a 40-hectare zone of Roombeek was gone. 400 homes destroyed, 1,500 buildings damaged, 1,250 people with nowhere to live. Investigators found that the 2 shipping containers used for storage had been illegal, and that the open fire doors had let the fire run through the complex. A 36-year-old man named Andre de Vries was convicted of arson in 2002 and sentenced to 15 years. The Arnhem Appeals Court acquitted him a year later. Bakker and Pater were each sentenced to 6 months in April 2002, acquitted of negligence, and resentenced to 12 months in February 2005. 25 years on, no one has ever established what started the fire. San Pablito Market. On December 20th, 2016, at the San Pablito Market in Tultepec, about 40 kilometers north of Mexico City. It was 5 days before Christmas, just after 3 in the afternoon, and the open-air market's 300 stalls were full of holiday shoppers. Tultepec was Mexico's fireworks town, with a 200-year production tradition, and roughly 65% of the people who lived there worked in the industry, directly or indirectly. San Pablito was the largest fireworks market in the country, and an estimated 300 tons of fireworks were sitting on the site that afternoon. Somewhere among the stalls, gunpowder ignited. The fire jumped stall to stall through all 300 tons of it. Video from the scene caught a staccato of rockets firing off in flashes of light as the chain reaction ran the length of the market. When it stopped, the market had been leveled. 26 people were declared dead at the site, and the toll climbed to 42 as victims died in hospitals. 84 people were injured. 12 were reported missing. About 80% of the 300 stalls were destroyed. Federal forensic teams deployed to the site the next day, and a girl with burns across more than 90% of her body was among the badly burned patients flown out to Shriners Hospital for Children in Galveston, Texas. Investigators never determined the exact ignition source. The preliminary accounts pointed only to gunpowder from the stall's own stock. It was the third devastating explosion to hit San Pablito since 2005. Blasts in 2005 and 2006 had already forced the market to adopt safety measures. The Federal Attorney General's office opened an investigation, and no confirmed cause was ever established. 2 years later, the market reopened on the same ground, rebuilt by the vendors who had survived it. Bonita Springs fireworks truck. On July 3, 2003, on a tip of vacant land at a state park site in Bonita Springs, Florida, on the Gulf Coast between Fort Myers and Naples, a tractor-trailer sat parked on the ground next to a smaller truck, 2 days out from the town's 4th of July show. The crew worked for Sunset Fireworks of Dittmer, Missouri, a company that had supplied displays for Disney's theme parks and for the city of Orlando. Ken Kennard of Cocoa Beach was among them. They were moving boxes of fireworks from the semi-trailer to the smaller truck by hand. The tractor-trailer, packed with the display load, burst into flame. The fire set off a series of explosions through the loaded shells. 4 of the workers moving the fireworks were killed at the scene. 2 others were injured. Ken Kennard was taken to the burn unit at Tampa General Hospital, and he died there the next morning, bringing the toll to 5. A Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms investigation concluded the following year that the cause couldn't be determined. The vehicles were too badly destroyed, and every direct witness to the transfer had died in it. No cause was ever officially established. The Bonita Springs 4th of July display was canceled. Puttingal Temple competition. On April 10, 2016, at the Puttingal Temple in Paravur, in Kerala's Kollam district on the southwest coast of India, it was 3:30 in the morning, the last day of a 7-day festival honoring the goddess Bhadrakali, and roughly 15,000 pilgrims were on the grounds. 2 groups of devotees were competing. Kerala ran annual competitions for the most spectacular fireworks display, and the 2 groups were firing against each other in front of the crowd. On the temple grounds stood a concrete storehouse holding the fireworks stock set aside for the coming Vishu celebrations. A firecracker of the type known locally as an Amatu fell into it. The sparks reached the stockpile and the storehouse detonated. The blast collapsed the storage building and the office building next to it and was felt more than a kilometer away. 111 people were killed. More than 350 were injured, many with severe burns. The temple and at least 150 houses around it were damaged. The Navy, the Air Force, the Army, and the Coast Guard coordinated the rescue. Most of the injured were taken to Thiruvananthapuram Medical College, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi called it heart-rending and shocking beyond words. 2 days later, authorities revealed that the temple had been denied permission for the display on safety grounds, and had gone ahead anyway under pressure from the crowd, though temple officials claimed they'd had verbal approval. The same day, the man who had organized the display died of his injuries, taking the toll to 111. The Inquiry Commission found an unlicensed display, no safety distances, unauthorized fireworks, no crowd control, and prohibited chemicals in the manufacturing. 5 temple workers were taken into custody on April 11th and 7 more the next day, including the temple president. On April 13th, the Kerala High Court banned sound-emitting firecrackers after sunset at every place of worship in the state. Seest Fireworks Factory. On November 3, 2004, in Seest, a suburb of Kolding in southern Denmark, the N.P. Johnson's Fireworks Works sat on the edge of a residential area of about 2,000 people, and that afternoon, 2 employees were working inside a storage container on the site. Max Jorgensen was 33. He was a carpenter, and he happened to be working a job in Seest that day. He was also a volunteer with the Kolding Fire Service, and when the call came in, he went. He had a wife and 2 sons, 7 and 5. Inside the container, the 2 employees dropped a box of fireworks. The contents ignited, and both men had to run for it. Fire crews reached the site, and Max Jorgensen and another volunteer began preparing hoses for a water tanker. It became clear the burning container was going to explode, and the firefighters were ordered back. around 2,000 residents in the surrounding area were evacuated. At 25 past 3, the first container detonated, and the rest of the factory's stock went with it in a series of violent explosions. The pressure wave hit Max Jorgensen and several other firefighters. He died instantly. 7 members of the rescue team and 17 local residents were injured. 34 rescuers, 8 police officers, and 27 personnel from the Danish Emergency Management Agency were treated for smoke inhalation, and 8 fire and rescue vehicles were destroyed where they stood. The evacuation of those 2,000 people, ordered before the main detonation, was what investigators credited with holding the death toll at 1. Max Jorgensen was posthumously awarded the Danish Defense Medal for fallen and wounded in service. 2,107 buildings were damaged. 176 homes were left uninhabitable, and the damage came to an estimated 100 million euros. In November 2017, the factory site was cleared and rebuilt as housing, and the street laid through the middle of it was named Max Jorgensen's Way. Esparto Warehouse. On July 1, 2025, on agricultural land outside Esparto in Yolo County, California, northwest of Sacramento. It was 3 days before the 4th of July, coming up on 6 in the evening, and a warehouse stood on the property among the farm fields. 7 men were working inside it. Jesus Meneses Ramos, 18, of San Pablo. Angel Matthew Voller, 18, of Stockton. Johnny Ernesto Ramos, 22, of San Pablo. Joel Jeremias Melendez, 28, of Sacramento, who went by Junior. Neil Justin Lee, 41, of San Francisco. Carlos Javier Rodriguez Mora, 43, of San Andreas. And Christopher Goltiao Bocog, 45, of San Francisco. The warehouse belonged to a company called Devastating Pyrotechnics, and a second operation, Black Star Fireworks, worked out of the property next door. At about 10 to 6, fire broke out inside the warehouse. It took the structure fast. Small explosions kept going off inside as crews worked it from the outside, and mandatory evacuations were ordered within a mile. At around 7, the warehouse went up in one catastrophic blast. All 7 men inside were killed. 2 more people were injured. The blast threw spot fires across the surrounding fields and destroyed 2 to 3 homes. CAL FIRE led the response, with help from the ATF, and the resulting Oakdale fire burned 78 acres before it was fully contained on July 6th. Investigators found that Devastating Pyrotechnics had no business license and no permission to store fireworks on the property, that the site wasn't equipped to store them, and that the land was zoned for agriculture only. They found that Kenneth Chi, the company's owner and chief executive, had been denied a federal license to purchase or own explosives over a 1998 assault conviction, and had held California state licenses to trade, sell, and launch fireworks anyway. And they found that the property itself was owned by Sam Machado, a serving lieutenant with the Yolo County Sheriff's Office, whose own home on the site was damaged in the blast. On April 10, 2026, the Yolo County District Attorney charged 5 men, Machado and Chi among them, with 7 counts each of second-degree murder, 1 count for every man who died. Prosecutors alleged a decade-long conspiracy that had brought more than 11 million pounds of explosives through the property. At least 1 million pounds were sitting on it the day it went up. Mesa Redonda. On December 29, 2001, in Mesa Redonda, a shopping district in the historic center of Lima, Peru. It was 2 days before New Year's Eve, about 7:30 in the evening, and the district's narrow streets of wood and adobe buildings were packed with holiday crowds. Every December, Mesa Redonda turned into Lima's fireworks bazaar. Informal vendors worked the streets, and the galleries alongside them held stock. The city had already flagged the district as a danger. One of the vendors set off a pyrotechnic device known locally as a chocolate to demonstrate it for customers. A spark from the demonstration landed on a stockpile nearby. That stock went up, and it set off the stock next to it, and the chain kept running. The fire became a wall of flame that spread across 4 blocks and burned for hours, through buildings with no emergency exits and no firefighting equipment of their own. It was one of the deadliest fireworks fires in history, and how many people it killed has never been settled. The official inquiry counted 277 bodies and 180 people still missing. Peruvian outlets, citing official figures, put the dead at more than 400. Firefighters worked the blaze with defective equipment. So many of the dead were unrecoverable or unidentifiable that families were left to DNA testing, and others were registered only as NN, no name. In 2002, the public ministry put up a web portal to help families find them. Confiscations afterward turned up tons of pyrotechnics across the galleries, stored illegally among other combustibles. When the judicial process finally began in 2008, the courts never established who was directly responsible. General Luis Alberto Sanchez Arias of the National Police was convicted for having ordered the officers supervising the entry of pyrotechnics into the area to withdraw. Peru banned the sale of pyrotechnics in the wake of the fire, and Mayor Alberto Andrade, who was in Spain when it happened, welcomed the ban on his return. Felix Horna, the lawyer for the affected families, has spent 2 decades arguing that the people who actually did it were never reached. He names the municipality of Lima, the Ministry of the Interior, and a customary he says ordered 100 tons of pyrotechnics stored in Mesa Redonda. If stories like this stay with you, subscribe, and tell me what to cover next in the comments.